Hey, good evening. It's good to see everyone, and I'm going to go ahead and say this again to all y'all that are here. This is still my favorite service, so don't tell anybody about that or anything. But I love our time together here, and I do want to ask you a question, though. I want to ask you a question if you've ever been hungry before, and I'm not talking like here, have a Snickers, you're not yourself when you're hungry. I'm talking like the hunger that is inside of you takes over every aspect of who you are. And you just can't do anything else but think about food and really try to find food. Now, I have to tell you about my sophomore year of college. In fact, I'm going to refer to this weekend as the Great Fall Famine of 1991. It was one of those things that Dallas Christian College did not serve meals on the weekends. So at Friday evening, you would get supper, and then you were on your own until Monday morning for brunch. And so this particular weekend, just a series of events happened that didn't typically happen. First of all, between myself and my dorm roommate, we had, between the two of us, part of a loaf of bread and a jar of mustard. That is it. Now, normally, one of us would have cash. We both had jobs and so on. So if one was running short on cash, the other was there, and we could run to, like, Ponchos. Y'all remember Ponchos? $4.95, horrible Mexican food, but you could eat all you wanted. So we would go there and different things. Well, that particular weekend, neither one of us had money. Neither one of us had any cash. Now, we usually had a fallback, and fallback was my dad. My dad, who is a very generous man and so on, here's what he would do. He would send $50 every week so that I could eat on the weekend. In fact, I'll even tell you that I walked into the student lounge on that day, and Mrs. Crawford was in the little office, little mail room and so on, and she looked at me, and Mrs. Crawford had this look of utter, I'm so sorry, disappointment on her face, and she said, "I'm sorry, your dad's money didn't come in this week." And that's how well Mrs. Crawford knew everything was going on. So we had this, part of a loaf of bread, and that was it. So here's what ended up happening, because I was a good Bible college student, and I wanted to be all spiritual and all. So the day that we went without food on Saturday, I made it spiritual and went on a fast. And so I could at least say that, there was something cool about that and so on. But the next day we went to church. My roommate and I, we went to church at a place called Central Christian Church in Richardson. And we walked in, and we were hoping that someone would see these gaunt, malnourished college students and take them out to lunch. But it didn't happen. And so we went home after church, and we decided we can't eat because we just have bread and mustard, and who wants to eat that together without lunch meat and cheese and all that? And so as the day went along, I couldn't study, I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't read, I couldn't do anything. All I could do was think about food. All I could do was just absolutely think about food. And so it got so bad that I got up. And I can't remember exactly what we were doing. We were probably watching the Cowboys lose. But anyway, I got up and I grabbed the loaf of bread. Now, you have to know something about my roommate, Mark. Mark has a way of looking at people like, you're an absolute idiot. And he has that look on his face. And so I grabbed the bread, and he goes, "Schaefer, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to make myself a sandwich." He goes, "All we have is bread and mustard." And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to make myself a sandwich." And he looked at me like, "Schaefer, you're an idiot." And so I'm going to tell you that I pulled out the bread, pulled out the mustard, put two pieces of bread together, and I had my first and only mustard sandwich. And I'm going to tell you it was the best mustard sandwich I have ever had in all my life because I was so hungry. Now, even though I was hungry then, I don't know that I really understand hunger. I don't know what it means to have all of my life and all of my existence to be all about finding my next meal. Because even though I had that mustard sandwich and it tided me over till morning, I knew that there was going to be pancakes or biscuits and gravy or something the next morning. And I didn't have to worry about the next meal or the next one or the next one after that. But true hunger leads us to a place where we get consumed, almost obsessive about finding our next meal. And even though we might be eating now, we are always thinking ahead about what about the next one? What about that next meal? And again, in our 21st century world, in America, the most of us don't really get hunger. We don't get the obsessive nature that happens when we are hungry and we are thirsty. And so Jesus, as he is teaching, and as he is beginning what we call the Sermon on the Mount, and he is in these collection of sayings called the Beatitudes, he begins with, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I love that. Blessed are those who realize that they're not okay. Blessed are those who realize they have nothing to offer God. Blessed are the meek, or those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And those who are really truly sorry for the sin in their life and the brokenness. And then it says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. When you think about meek, that's a yielding of our control over to God. And I think sometimes we do that willingly, and I think sometimes we do that because we have to, and we know it's best for us. But the very next one that Jesus kind of brings into play, as we're talking about statements of blessing, he says this, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Now, again, I don't know that we understand and quite comprehend what it really means to hunger, but I'm going to say that it's all-consuming. It's all we think about. It takes over who we are. And then Jesus says that we are to hunger and thirst for righteousness. Now, when you hear the word righteousness, or you hear the word righteous, what do you think about? I don't know about you, but as soon as I hear the word, I always think about doing right. That there's a component of moral behavior here. In fact, one of the things that I think we tend to do with this word is we think about do good and be good. In fact, I once heard a preacher from North Richland Hills, Texas, actually, who said this one time. He said, we are to be a bunch of do-gooders. And so when we think about righteousness, a preacher could get up and say, what we need to do is be good and do good. And so we are to be these do-gooders. And preachers will kind of harp on that. And I know, because I've been out where y'all are, when I hear about righteousness, I think, well, I need to be a better person. In fact, you probably are going through a little bit of your list right now saying, well, I need to stop doing this, I need to stop saying this, I need to stop thinking this. You're going through that thing of, what can I do to be a better person? And so when you hear a sermon on righteousness, you decide, I'm going to be a better person. I'm going to go home today, and things are going to be different. And you go home after church, and there's a football game on, and your team is playing, and said team, my team would be the Cowboys, some of y'all the Broncos, and different things like that, but whatever it be, said team throws an interception. And that word that you said that you were never ever going to say again just comes out of your mouth, right? And you think, well, I have just blown it already. Or it's a wife who says, I know I disrespect my husband. I know I kind of nag, and I react differently. And so I'm going to react differently from here on out. That is until your husband decides that he's not going to react the way you want, and gloves come off, and it's go time, right? Or it's maybe your kids. Do kids ever kind of like lose their ever-loving mind? You can say yes, all right? Kids do stupid stuff. And when kids do stupid stuff, I don't know about y'all, but when my kids do stupid stuff, I can like go postal. 2 of my kids are in here. You can ask them. I think it's a dad will just go nuts. Saying, I'm not going to yell at my kids anymore. And then my kids do what they do. They be kids. And then it's again, that good that I wanted to do, I don't do that. I do the stupid stuff that I don't want to do, and I've made this an intentional effort to become righteous, and I realize that I've blown it. Does that resonate with anyone? Does anybody else get that? Because I just look at that. And so let me ask this question here tonight. What if being good and doing good was not the most important part about righteousness? What if being good and doing good is only part of the picture, but it's not the first part of the picture? Could you maybe handle righteousness just a little bit better? See, when we hear the word righteousness, one of the things that we tend to do is we tend to think of the various components that go into righteousness. So let me give you those components here today. We think of behavioral sort of things. We think of systematic. So if I'm going to have behavior, it's according and conforming to a specific system. And we think that if my behavior is good enough according to the system, then I can have a relationship with God. So that's kind of how that sort of works. And so there is a relational component, a systematic component, and a behavioral component. And a lot of times what we do, in fact, I got a little arrow and so on like that, we believe if my behavior conforms to a system, then I can have a relationship with God. And if you look at every religion in the world, that's what righteousness would be. That your behavior conforms to a system, and when you have a behavior that conforms to a system, then you can have a relationship with God. But here's the reality. There is not a single person in this room, no matter how good you are, and I'm sure a lot of you are a whole lot better than me. But the reality is there's not a single person in the room here tonight who can 100% have a behavior that conforms to the system and the pattern that God has designed for us to live by. And so therefore what we find is the very fact that the path to God through good behavior is impossible. I want you to understand that. The path to God through behavior is impossible. Here's basically what's happening. Jesus is talking to a group of people. And they know that there's another group of people. This group of people is actually called the Pharisees. The Pharisees were known for their righteousness. And later, as Jesus is preaching, he says, your righteousness has to exceed theirs. In other words, there has to be something different in you that has to exceed what their righteousness is. But I can't have better behavior. But even them, they had to understand that their righteousness was not good enough. In fact, several years later, actually a couple of decades later, a man by the name of Paul was writing a book to the Roman church, or a letter to the Roman church, and this is what he said about our behavior. He says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Now, when he said, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God in Romans chapter 3, one of the things you have to understand is the language here is a little bit different than ours. And so there's verb tenses and different things. And the verb tense is, for all have sinned and keep on sinning and continually fall short of the glory of God. So it's not like that was part of our past that we couldn't live up. That's part of our present. And it's also going to be part of our future, that we continually fail in our behavior according to the system. So what if we have things out of order? What if we have things out of order where behavior is not the first thing, and then the system, and then relationship? What if we kind of flipped that around and said, we're going to kind of turn the world upside down, and we're going to put relationship first? Because you see, when Jesus was about ready to go to the cross, in fact, it was the night before he was to go to the cross the next day, he was talking to his closest followers. And as he was talking to his closest followers, he said, listen, I'm getting ready to go away. I'm getting ready to go to be back up into heaven and be with my Father, who is your God. I'm getting ready to go there, and you know how to go where I am going. And somebody said, listen, we don't know the way. We don't know how to get from where we are to where you're going to be. And Jesus said these words. He said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so basically what Jesus is saying here is that connecting our life to Him takes care of the relationship component with God. He provides that for us. He provides the relationship that we look to say in righteousness is what we want. In fact, what Jesus says is He has given us His righteousness. It's been freely given to you and I. And so with this, one of the things that Jesus is saying is that a relationship with Him, relationship with Jesus, now becomes the foundation of righteousness. And here's how I love this. I love that in Matthew chapter 9, so we're talking just a few chapters after Jesus preaches this Sermon on the Mount, Jesus walks up, and He walks up to this what's called a tax collector's booth, and I kind of picture a table, and a man sitting behind a table, and he is taking money from people, and Jesus walks up to this man by the name of Levi. We also call him Matthew, and He says these words to him, "Be better." No, that's not what He said. He walked up to Levi and He said in Matthew chapter 9, verse 9, "Follow me." Matthew, what I want you to do is I want you to follow me. I want you to connect your life with my life. I want you to walk with me. I want you to spend time with me. And let me take care of what everybody else says is wrong with your life. And here's the beautiful thing. Matthew did that. Matthew spent time with Jesus, and he walked with Jesus. And after that, after Jesus died, and Matthew went and preached around, he preached to the Jewish people, and he wrote a book called Matthew on the life of Jesus. But the invitation was not be better, but the invitation ultimately was follow me. Another time, Jesus said these words to a group of fishermen. He said, "Follow me. Connect yourself to me. Spend time with me. Walk with me." And then He says this, "And I will make you fishers of men." Here's the cool thing. Who they would become was not a result of trying to have better behavior. Who they would become was a result of connecting themselves to the person of Jesus. And that's the invitation for you and I. In fact, over the last couple of years, a few verses from Matthew have been critical in my life. They're the words in Matthew chapter 11. And in Matthew chapter 11, it says this, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Now, if I'm a person who marks in my Bible, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to underline "come to me," but I'm going to do that with an arrow pointing to everything that is ahead. I'm going to say that when Jesus says, I will give you rest, and you will learn from me, and you will find rest for your souls, I see all of that is connected to the whole notion of come to me. In other words, Jesus is saying, spend time with me, get away with me, have relationship with me, have friendship with me, and I'm going to take care of everything else. And so with this, let me just say it this way, and this is our bottom line. The most important component of righteousness is not behavior, it is connection to Jesus. In other words, when Jesus says that you hunger and thirst for righteousness, it is you hunger and thirst for a relationship and friendship and time and journey with Him. Now you're probably saying, but Brandon, what about behavior? And I'm going to say it like this. The more I spend time with someone, the more I will know them, and the more I will act like them. I'm going to venture to say that if you've been married for any length of time, you are probably a little bit more like your spouse than what you would like to admit. You want to know why that is? Time. fact, I'll never forget that one time my son was talking about a friend of his and who's been married just a few years, and he said, I hate to admit it, but he's become a male version of his wife. Why does that happen? You spend time with them. Now, sometimes that could be a good thing, and sometimes that can be a bad thing. I remember Richie McKay. Y'all remember Richie McKay used to coach the Lobos in basketball? Richie McKay used to say, show me your friends and I will show you your future. So in other words, who you spend time with is who you will become. And so with that, here's a beautiful thing. When we spend time with Jesus, the more we're going to know him, the more we're going to act and look like him. And so here's the reality. If I spend time with Jesus and I'm in a relationship with him and I focus my life and become consumed with this, I'm going to get to know him. And when I get to know him, I'm going to begin to look like him. And the behavior that I want to have will be an outflow of the relationship that I already have. In fact, in John chapter 15, that's exactly what Jesus said. He said, I'm the vine, you are the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from Jesus, we can't do anything. But then he said, that you remain in me and I in you, and you will produce much fruit. In other words, the fruit is going to take care of itself. In Hebrews chapter 13, I love this. In fact, it says that a father disciplines a son. And it also says that God disciplines those that he loves. And so sometimes God takes us through storms and he takes us through difficult things. But it says that in that passage that when we're in relationship with God and he takes us through sometimes difficult things, it will produce in it a harvest of righteousness. In other words, God's going to take care of the transformation and change that sometimes we really try to have within ourselves. Now, here's brutal honesty. I don't like this. Brutal honesty is, I am an independent person. Brutal honesty is, I want to do things myself. And so I want to have a stake in this. I still want to stand before God in heaven and for him to say, you know what? Jesus, you did a lot, but Brandon, you did too. So it doesn't work that way. It works with Jesus doing his work and me connecting myself to him and allowing him to continue to do his work. So what do we do with this? How do we own this? And so I'm going to talk about this here tonight, and it's really one of those things that I really believe that these are some of the hardest things for us to do. One aspect of owning it is simply this: come to Jesus. Come to Jesus. I don't know what that looks like for you. I know what it looks like for me. And I'm going to tell you that this has not always been an easy part of my life. I will tell you that I, as a preacher and a Bible college guy and a master's guy, have spent a long time in the Bible. And I love to dig deep in the Bible. But I found out a couple of years ago that my time in the Bible was predominantly for study. Predominantly for times like this. And I would justify it and say, well, I'm doing sermon prep and different things. But I have a very wise person say, but are you coming to Jesus? And so I'm going to tell you that I have discovered in my life what coming to Jesus looks like. It means that I get up in the morning and for some reason or another, and I don't know why this is, but I must be getting old. It's like I go to bed. My wife says I have narcolepsy after 6 o'clock and sometimes before then. But I go to bed really early and I get up really early. So 4:30, 4:45 rolls around. I'm ready to start my day. Now, I have all this time, and a lot of times what I will do is think, I've got all of this time. Look what I can get done. Anybody with me? But I also realize the most important thing that I can get done is to grab my coffee, go into the office, open up the Word, and spend time with Jesus. And I will tell you that sets the trajectory for the rest of the day. And I would love to tell you I do this every day. I would love to tell you that this is just something that's really easy for me. It is not. Because I'm one of those people that's ready to get the day started, and sometimes it's easy to push this off to the side. In fact, I'm going to tell you in 2020, the very first sermon series that we're going to be doing is called The One Thing That Changes Everything, and we're going to talk about Bible study. We're going to talk about being personally in the Word in our lives with Jesus. Also, as we talk about coming to Jesus, I'm going to say this: trust that Jesus is enough. Trust that Jesus is enough. We just sang that Christ is enough for me. Do we really believe that? Because in my life, I'm going to tell you, I think a lot of times that we're willing to say, you know, Ephesians 2:8, for it is by grace that you have been saved, and so on, like, and we will scream that out. But deep down inside, and I know this is horrible grammar, we try to think that if I'm just good enough, I can be saved-er. Saved-er. Like, in other words, Jesus has saved me. I get that. I know that. But again, I want a part in this. I want to do some of this on my own. So I want my goodness to matter. I want my goodness to be part of what I hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant. And we just have to come to the realization that Jesus really is enough. In fact, I'm going to say it like this: Jesus is everything or he is nothing. He is everything. He is all our salvation. He has accomplished all the work. And if he hasn't accomplished all of the work, it is nothing. So we have to trust that his work is enough. And so as I close out here tonight, and we're going to go into a time of communion, we want to invite you to come and remember what Jesus has done. I want to share a story. I want to share a story that actually happened in 1988, and it was shared by Max Lucado in his book, The Applause of Heaven. On December 7, 1988, there was an earthquake in Soviet Armenia. That's back when the Soviet Union still existed and so on, and if you don't know what that is, go ahead and Google it. It's been a long time. But there was an earthquake, and Susanna Petroisin and her daughter Gayani were actually on the fourth floor of a 9-story apartment building. And when the earthquake happened, the building crumbled, and they actually ended up in the basement. And being that it was December and very, very cold, Susanna said it wasn't very long until she lost all feeling in her hands and her feet. And she couldn't tell whether it was night or day because it was just all night. And but she kept hearing these words from her daughter, time and time and time again: "Mommy, I thirst." And she doesn't know for how long she kept hearing those words, "Mommy, I thirst," knowing she had no juice or milk or water. She was looking at the very fact that the injuries that her daughter sustained would probably not kill her. She would die of thirst if they were not rescued and didn't get something to drink. And then she remembered hearing about some Russian explorers who got trapped in the Arctic, and one of them was dying of thirst, and the other cut his hand and allowed the other to drink his blood. So she felt around from where she was, and she found a shard of glass. And she cut her finger, and she allowed her daughter to drink her blood. And no longer was she hearing the words, "Mommy, I thirst." She heard the words, "Mommy, another finger." And after 8 days, they were rescued. And she said these words, "I lost count of how many times I cut my hands and my fingers. But I knew blood was my daughter's only hope." Now, the world's going to tell you that there's hope in a lot of things. I'm going to tell you that there is only one hope, and that hope is in the body and the blood of Jesus that was sacrificed for us. Will you join me in prayer? God and Father, I thank you that Jesus is sufficient, that Jesus is enough. So now, Father, I pray that we trust and that we understand that we can't do this on our own or give ourselves a righteousness. It only comes from you. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.